You're listening to Data Center Therapy. Please take a number, and an engineer will be right with you.
Boom. Good evening, afternoon, morning, whenever you're listening, everybody. Welcome back to yet another episode of Data Center Therapy. And I say yet another, but it's been a little while, right, Coz?
It has been.
Has it been 1 month?
Maybe even two.
Has it been two? Yeah, it's been two.
I know it's been a summer vacation for me.
So, yeah, we are definitely meeting our goal of twice a month episodes. Yes, thank you very much for those still listening. Yes, we are back with another episode of Data Center Therapy. And today we have a repeat guest, but not a frequent guest, I would say. You know him probably, and if you don't, you will love him shortly. Mr. Hoppy Shaw. Hoppy, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely. And you see, you hear that right there. You can't see him. We wish you could. But you hear that, and now you already can tell that you're going to love this guy.
Giant smile plastered on
Absolutely.
his face.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This world of despair in IT and things like, sometimes I'm like, I wish I was a mechanic. I wish I had another talent.
I want to go work at Walmart and say, hey, welcome to Walmart.
Everybody's had those days, right? And so Hoppy, this definitely makes it all better and elevates us all. So, yeah. So, Hoppy, you came on board. Has it been a year yet?
I'm coming up on that anniversary. It's right around there. I think October of last year. Yeah.
There you go.
Wow.
Kaz, you're up to like 11 now, right?
Just this month, yeah.
Just was this month or coming
Just
this month?
this month is 11. So I think I don't know what day it was exactly, but yes, I'm at 11 years now.
Awesome. Well, congrats.
That's terrific.
And next May will be 10 for me. So I'm right on your heels, Kaz.
Right on my heels.
Yeah, so Hoppy, they go fast. Trust me.
Yeah,
Trust us. They go very quickly. Yeah. But you came on and you've had, I guess the core of your experience and your expertise is, I guess, end user computing, for lack of a better broad term, right?
Yeah, it's really kind of generalized into that now. I've always worked in operations, so this is my first real true working as a consultant full time. And one of the things that I really was drawn to in the early 2000s was ActiveSync, and when that came along with Exchange, because I was an Exchange admin and a regular systems administrator. And when ActiveSync came along and I saw what it could do with mobile devices, it kind of gave me an excuse to work more with mobile devices. That way I was kind of always on the cutting edge of technology. When a new mobile device came out, I was like, oh, hey, I manage these. I should probably get, a new iPhone when the iPhone came out. Or that new Android, that's a pretty great looking phone. I should probably get a new one.
Toys to do my job.
For air quotes. For testing.
I like it.
Very smart.
And during that time, I worked a lot with SMS, those of you that remember that wonderful product that then turned into SCCM, System Center Configuration Manager, and now is Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager. And so what's happened over the last 5 years in my career before I came to IVOXY was all of these technologies kind of merged. So we had mobile device management that was in the cloud as part of Intune and other mobile device managers. And then you had desktops and laptops and mobile devices all living in close proximity in kind of the same place, same portals where you're managing them. And it just became kind of a segue into, well, I guess it really is everything end user computing. So anything the end user touches is really a specialty in and of itself now. And the fact that I have a pretty thorough understanding of Active Directory and Exchange, which of course led to Microsoft 365, it's made that transition all the better. So I feel really comfortable talking about those subjects and certainly helping customers figure out what their next move is in that space.
I do feel like you kind of end up being our de facto Microsoft guy.
Yeah.
Like in that kind of role, right?
Yeah, because there's so many things that touch something else. We were working with a customer the other day, and it was strictly really an Intune engagement. There really wasn't much around Active Directory, but one of the first things we had to start with is, well, how is your directory structure set up? Are you already syncing to the cloud? And if not, Then we have to, look down the road of AD Connect and get that set up. What objects do you want to sync, or are you ready to maybe make that move 100% in the cloud and just go full Azure? And there are some companies, one of which we worked with recently, who wanted to go that route. They were like, you know what, we don't really have an on-prem infrastructure, so to speak. We have an Azure infrastructure that's kind of So we made it better for them and created policies and procedures, and now they're all under device management and couldn't be happier.
And
It's funny how you're talking about SMS and SCCM in the concept of mobile device management, right? And it used to be, how do I make sure that my new users' iPhones are provisioned with the Exchange account automatically, and maybe they have access to, I don't know, our Citrix apps or something like that, where it's pushed. The idea was, how do I make setting up the phone easy? And it was truly mobile devices. Now the mobile device management is endpoint. I mean, the mobile device is now really endpoint. Mobility doesn't matter. The point of mobility is it can be in the office or it can be away from the office. Even if you can't pick up and move the computer,
we've kind of discovered we don't have to. We
within
don't have
your
to have a
control.
work machine necessarily. Yeah.
And I would say it's less about. I mean, it's still important, but certainly more important to make sure that endpoint is secure before we push down and provision your computer with access to all of these applications or data points. It just in my own career, my own mind, just to get a feel for where the concern was and what the point of MDM used to be versus what the point of MDM now is. MDM is management, actually getting your arms around making sure that device is secure first and foremost. Prove that all the time, and the second that it's compromised, access to everything, goes back zero trust, no access. And so that's the point. Is I think a lot of people still say MDM. That acronym still hangs around, but it's really endpoint control, endpoint security.
Yeah, and you mentioned security, and that's part of this end user computing platform that makes it so interesting. Is before you hate to say in the old days, because I know people that have been in IT for 5 years, they have a different experience than the three of us did starting out. But it very much was a siloed type thing. People that worked on servers. People that work on desktops, laptops work on that. Security had their own thing. Networking had their own thing. And now in this new world, I feel like we have to wear all of those hats when we're talking about mobile device management, end user computing in general, because when I look in Azure and I create rules or different things, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, like Azure Virtual Desktop, I have to know about how it's going to network and talk to other systems. I have to know from a secure, how am I going to keep that endpoint secure? So I need to be familiar with how endpoint security works in different vendors and how that's going to interact with my endpoint. So it's I was never really very security minded or focused before, simply because we had other people that did that. But now it's kind of like, you kind of need to know about that as well, because it takes a team of folks to kind of manage your entire end user computing, systems, all your systems.
So Cozzolino, speaking of that siloed, who's in charge of the NSX deployment and configuration and monitoring and maintenance in a virtual environment?
There's a couple of different ways I've seen that. That's actually one of the questions that I bring up is, are you, the vSphere administrator, going to manage this security policy, or is security going to manage that? Are they going to? And is security going to have to learn the virtual interface, vCenter and et cetera? Right. Are we programming this? Are we scripting it? How are we?
That's one of the toughest challenges. When you talk to a customer who wants to know about the features of NSX, whether that's micros, typically it's microseg, but let's not only pin it into that cubbyhole, right? There's all kinds of stuff that it can do from a virtual network layer, but usually when we have conversations with our customers, there's a very specific team on the call, whether that's usually systems or a network and not both. And the NSX conversation can expose some pretty decent political battles at some of our customers as well.
And oftentimes there's a third group. There's network, there's
security,
infrastructure,
right?
And then security sometimes.
Yeah.
And their job is basically no,
and no.
Right.
Like Nick from Saturday Night Live. Move. No, we're not going to do that. Nick, the IT guy.
Yeah.
It was. That's a real question, a real problem for a lot of people is how do you get these teams to actually just work together? Because
Mhm.
no doesn't actually help anyone. But like this is the security posture we need to enact. Let's work together to figure out what your application does. How do we secure that? That's a whole other conversation.
And I think that's the part that I really appreciate about working here at IVOXY is that all of us as consultants, and I've seen this with you two guys and with others, where when we have a meeting with a customer, we notice pretty quickly, okay, are we talking to the right people or not? And one of the things that I think our customers appreciate is sometimes they're having conversations for the first time around some of these things with these other departments because we ask, we're going to do some end user security stuff around whether it be antivirus or malware or whatever. So why don't we bring security in, talk about what they want to see on the endpoints and how they want to see things configured, and are they going to be the ones monitoring, or not? Or are we sending that log shipping somewhere else? And then just having those discussions early on seem to go a really long way in the engagement because then security feels like they've got a say, they're involved, but they're not necessarily the ones that are going to implement it. They trust us to do what they've asked us to do, which is, hey, we're going to lock down this. These files
Trust
are
but
okay
verify.
to be open. These aren't.
Yeah.
So on and so forth. And so I think it goes a really long way in the way that we interact with our clients and customers about what their needs are.
I find it kind of amusing how cyclical things have been. I remember when I was in my early infrastructure days and we'd grumble at marketing or whomever that bought this software and say, hey, make this run. So you should have talked to us first, right? And now we've got security who's like, why didn't you talk to us first? And we've got to make sure we keep bringing these people in, keep having these conversations with everyone.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Can't just do it on your own.
And as long as you have that security team that is actually willing to help and work with you and not just throw up that roadblock, you bring them in early because I think early is the only way to do it. Otherwise, it's a scramble. You didn't tell us about this. You build some animosity. But if we know what their expectations and requirements are from the get-go, then we can design around that and not have to really necessarily get bogged down with constant, touch points or whatever, meetups. And, and then there's that trust built and away we go and you have a good working relationship. Yeah. All that to say, we're here really to talk about desktop as a service. How do you want me to introduce this?
I know it's such a buzzword
Yet another
type thing. I feel like
Yet another as a service. Yes.
I think just to make it really simple for folks, there's several options out there for you as a company to be able to connect to a desktop. And COVID, if anything, it showed the weakness that companies have in making sure that their employees can reach the things that they need to reach. A lot of them maxed out VPN connections when the work from home was mandated. A lot of folks didn't have ways to get into the resources that they needed because of whatever reason. So that sped along this thought process that, hey, wouldn't it be cool if there was some way from a web browser or a small client install that we could reach a desktop and that desktop could then reach other things that we need, other services, whether they be cloud-based services or on-prem services. And really, when you talk about that, that's really what we are providing is a desktop as a service, a desktop that you can use at your will to do what you need to do. And that comes in a few different flavors. And that's kind of what we're going to talk a little bit about today.
Do you still see that customers need a actual workstation to do their work on, or is it still, I guess the question was more along the lines, is it still keeping that data locally, right? You're in an office, you're sitting at a desk inside of the office, everything you're working on is there and you can kind of control it, versus here's your laptop and just connect via a VPN, I guess. Why the desktop versus a VPN?
Yeah, there's so many things to consider, and I can give you a couple of different scenarios. I had a CISO one time say that they wanted to get rid of every single laptop and desktop and go to thin client. And I scratched my head for a second and I said, okay, I can understand that. I could see why you would want to do that. So if we're thinking kind of old school, most people might be thinking of right away Horizon, and so you have on-prem VMware. You've got desktops that are being spun up. Maybe you use Citrix. That's another option. On-prem, where you're spinning up these desktops and connecting from thin client, but also from a thin client, you can connect to, for example, an Azure Virtual Desktop, which is something that's running in Azure that you would connect to and have that desktop experience. And so I thought about that for a bit, and I understand the reasoning behind it. The CISO was looking at that device. When it reboots, it resets. So I don't have to worry about managing it from a security standpoint. I don't have to worry about managing with applications. I don't have to worry about users. I don't have to worry about any of that. It's just a dumb endpoint terminal that somebody double clicks on an app. We manage the firmware and stuff behind the scenes, but they double click on an application. It then logs them into their desktop. They two-factor, and they have their desktop, and it doesn't matter where they're coming from. And so that really got me to think, that's not a terrible idea for some companies. Now, some companies, we're still going to give a resource, a desktop or a laptop. I just think that if you want to save some money, you could even, work it out to where you're doing a BYOD type situation. You give somebody access to a desktop in the cloud. That desktop is locked down. It's running the security you want. It's behind a firewall. It only connects to things that it's supposed to connect to, and it only allows certain users to log in under certain hours. That's one way to look at this, a BYOD scenario, a thin client scenario, or to the last point, sure, go ahead and give them a desktop, but just keep in mind that that's going to be a managed device or a resource that you're going to have to keep track of. And then you're also going to have to keep track of this desktop that you give them as well. So that's two resources basically for one person. So I think of desktops as a service as maybe that next logical step of replacing hardware in the enterprise from a very basic level. I'm not saying enterprises should stop providing equipment because not everybody has a laptop or a desktop at home. I'm just suggesting that is an alternative.
Everyone can be cheaper and more commodity for all of these desktops
Correct.
we're buying. They don't have to be workhorses.
Correct.
So, but I just heard an advocation. Is that a word? Advocation?
Advocation? Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
It's an IT podcast, not an English one. But anyway, I've heard an argument for virtual desktops. Not necessarily, am I right? Am I right here that it's not necessarily something like Azure virtual desktops? That right there, I can make the argument. You could say Horizon on-premise or Azure in the cloud.
Right.
Not a whole. I mean, that right there. There's nothing specific to either one of those that what we're talking about conceptually, right? I mean, the idea of limiting hardware sprawl, the amount of devices you have to manage. I think of it from a virtual desktop standpoint from a school. We have worked with many schools with Horizon. I mean, specifically Horizon deployments, but virtual desktops and. Talk about, I mean, what happens if, you have a sideways moving worm in Windows, and boom, there goes 800 desktops. Fine, shut them off and redeploy them. Like that kind of control.
Patch the one and redeploy.
Patch the golden image and redeploy. As long as you have other measures in place to secure your user data, which you do, right? Then it's not a big deal. And that to me. Wow, really? I have to update my agent once and then redeploy the image, and it's magic. So just playing a little devil's advocate. We're not talking about anything specific to an Azure virtual desktop deployment, right? So where do you see the daylight between hosting it on premise and going to the cloud? I would imagine a virtual desktop, and I think. Like a lot of things in IT, the shape of things change all the time, but the general need remains a lot of times. And things do change, but like desktop access, I'm on my desktop right now. I cannot have for example, a Chromebook. I can't do web apps full time. Eventually, I'm going to need to be in a jump box or do something of that nature, right? So
that's kind of driven by who you are and what kind of work you do.
It is, but. That's what I'm saying. Things shift, but first of all, we're assuming that a desktop is required because you're accessing stuff that requires a desktop to
Yeah.
access it. And it's not just some SaaS platform. You don't need a desktop to access Salesforce.com. You need a web browser.
Sure.
So, but from that
Or even
standpoint,
Word these days.
between an on-premise deployment and an Azure deployment, with the idea that we're jumping into a desktop for a reason, is there daylight between those two options?
There is, and I like to explain it by explaining a couple of different differentiators. The first thing that I want to explain the difference of is there are very specific changes or differences between two particular products that they always talk about when they talk about desktops as a service. They talk about Windows 365 and they talk about Azure Virtual Desktop. And the difference between the two is a Windows 365 offering enables you to have a 1-to-1 desktop ratio. So you're going to pay anywhere from $30 to $50 a month for a desktop that lives in Azure that may or may not have access to on-prem resources based on how it's configured. But it's yours to keep and yours alone. Whereas Azure Virtual Desktop is a one-to-many offering where I spin up one virtual desktop that is a multi-session desktop that many users can connect to. So a scenario would be you would create a host pool. You'd have a couple of different systems in there. Each system can hold 10 people or 15 or however many, depending on how you size it. And once you hit like 12 people, the other machine turns on to start handling people.
Would you say Windows 365 is a personal?
A Windows 365
feature?
is enterprise grade, but it's a one-to-one. It can be enterprise or personal, but it's a one-to-one.
So you consider that a persistent desktop in Horizon
Correct.
Land?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's the difference between that and the Citrix or the
Floating.
RDP session.
Right. It's a persistent always now, but here's the caveat that some people miss. With Azure Virtual Desktop Multi-Session, you have the option to have a persistent desktop as well, even though you're all on one VM and 10 of you are logged in at the same time. When you log off that VM and log on again and get another VM, that is going to be a persistent experience because of stuff that's happening in the back end, how we set things up, using some third-party tools, and it's a pretty straightforward process.
So that's really sucked the user profile out of the desktop, and now it's portable across.
And those of you that are familiar with Horizon and app attach, this is like profile attach. It's doing is when you log in to that desktop, it's attaching your profile and your applications if you choose to deploy apps that way as well, and then it will just attach and be part of that experience when you're logged in. So I wanted to say those kind of two differences between those two. But as you look at it from whether or not Horizon, Citrix, or cloud, it really 100% depends on your infrastructure. There's some customers that I've talked to since I've been here at IVOXY that 100% have an infrastructure that any part of it can't be moved into Azure, and they don't, from a security perspective, feel comfortable allowing Azure access. So for them, it's just not even a starter question, because even if we were to give them desktops in the cloud, if there's no way for them from Azure to do a point-to-point VPN or express route, then there's no reason
if the resources aren't living in Azure, that the desktop itself is grabbing them, what's the point?
Then unless they were all cloud-based solutions, and you were giving your developers in wherever country your developers live, maybe they live outside the U.S., and you want to give them desktops that are Windows-based that you allow access to your cloud apps through conditional access or whatever from those desktops, then it can kind of make sense. But otherwise, there's not a real big story for that. Whereas some customers are like, you know what, we'll do a point-to-point VPN, site-to-site VPN with Azure, and we'll do some desktops, and we're gonna complement or augment our infrastructure and bolt on an Azure Virtual Desktop instance. We're working with someone now to do that, where they've got an infrastructure already, but they're like, hey, we have these 50 users that it would be awesome if we could provide a solution for them because they travel a lot, they're not on-prem, they need access to cloud apps and this other like 2 CRM type apps. And as long as they can have access to that, we're great. But we don't want to give them laptops because it would be easier if, instead of spending, 50 laptops, let's just give them 50 desktops and allow them to have access to that CRM. And guess what? They can get to it from any device. So whatever device they want to use, they can go and get to where they need to go. And so I guess it just really depends on your infrastructure and how tied to your internal infrastructure are you, and what's your path to the cloud been up to this point. Some folks are farther ahead than others. So, it just really depends.
And you've got the same kind of benefit from going to the cloud with this desktop as far as like scalability and ability to spin up VMs, right? You don't have that on-prem. I've got my 4 hosts that are running my VDI environment.
Typically, what we'll do is we create not an old school golden image, because I don't want to say, I've never been a fan, even back in the SMS days, of creating an image that had everything on it and then doing a golden image that way. Because the problem is that every time there's an update to any app that you put on that device, it's going to have to be updated, and so you're going to have to unpack the image and do all of that. So I much rather have a vanilla image, or as vanilla as I can, add maybe an app or two that I know is not going to change, or whatever the case is, and then you create that in Azure, and then as part of the Azure image gallery, every time you spin up a VM, there's 20 different ways to automate this. Terraform, Azure DevOps, other methods. I mean, you can just make it so that it's pretty seamless. So when you need another VM, one will be created in the host pool that you're in, that your users are assigned, and it'll just keep spinning up. And of course, all the automation to shut down machines when people aren't using them, saving resources, that kind of thing. So we build all of that in when we build out the Azure Virtual Desktop solution.
Do they have GPU accelerated AVDs,
Yes.
Virtual Desktop out there too?
Yes, they do.
Okay, that's
Yep.
one thing that we see an awful lot of on premise. Yeah.
Yeah,
But to your
lots
point,
of-
Kaj, how many desktops per host that run on these very expensive GPUs?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you could take that, Matt, and think about, all right, well, I could take this very expensive GPU and I can put that in Azure. Might cost just a little bit more, but I can attach 5 users to it, or 6 users, or 7, and they can get the functionality of that GPU, but it's a multi-session host. So ultimately, the whole goal of AVD is to save money, but also give you a desktop experience that is not tied to a particular piece of hardware.
And so for our customers, and over the years that we've helped deploy like a Horizon View desktop environment, I haven't seen this personally, but I've heard, and Ryan told me, that you can have Horizon now leverage Azure Virtual Desktop effectively as kind of a remote cluster of pools.
Yeah, absolutely. Horizon and Citrix both have that option. They both work with Microsoft on this. I'm
stunned they play along. I mean, right there, putting that out there.
Yeah. Back when it was Windows Virtual Desktop, which was the first name before it switched to Azure Virtual Desktop, Citrix was, I believe, the first provider to kind of bridge that gap. And now you can, let's say you've got a pretty robust Citrix infrastructure or Horizon infrastructure, and your admins are used to working in that console. You could just simply add, that could continue to be your front end, and you could have an Azure Virtual Desktop back end to either one of those environments, where it could take advantage of host pools, multi-session, use your image, whatever you want to do. I always like to tell people the few gotchas in that is you always have to consider licensing. Microsoft made it really easy for current Microsoft customers or customers that want to buy licenses to be able to spin up Azure Virtual Desktops, and as long as you're connecting from a Microsoft device or you've been assigned a license as part of your organization, you're going to be fine. There's no additional cost. No VDA licenses, none of those are needed that you currently need, in Horizon and Citrix environments.
Interesting.
How does the user experience connect? Like if you've got an on-prem Horizon and you're going to create a scalable pool on Azure, does my endpoint connect to that broker, the UAG, the whatever, those servers, and then tunnel back to Azure?
Yeah.
Or do I end up connecting directly to Azure?
No. So in most companies, whether it be Citrix or Horizon, they always have that the portal entry. So you open up the portal, you see your apps, You see your desktops. Azure Virtual Desktop is just going to show up as another object within that portal. So your desktop will show up there. You double click it, and the UAGs and everything will handle that back to Azure, and you're connected right up.
Well, right, and that's my question: is does my physical endpoint that I'm touching tunnel through wherever my UAG is, or does it natively go into the cloud? So like what I'm asking is, if I've got like a half a meg internet connection at my office, right? Mm-hmm. Do I have to still route everything through there, or does it offload and send it directly?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't send it. It won't send it through there. I understand your question. There's also something called RDP, because the protocol that it uses is still based on 443 and 80 and 3389 for regular RDP stuff. But it's secure in the sense that there's something called short path that you can create, where if you're on-prem and connecting, you can leverage the resources on-prem to connect if it's a better connection than using another, like the workaround connection. And the name of that is short path. How that integrates with Horizon specifically or Citrix, I can't tell you off the top of my head.
But I network hat on and understand how.
Yeah.
All those data flows around, right? The questions we have to ask.
Right.
Remember those silos.
That'd be one of the ones where if I knew it was a requirement, we have to go to the old Googles and VMware.com and kind of check out. Yeah.
Nice.
Well, Hoppy, we really appreciate you joining us today. It's interesting. This is something that a lot of times, as a technology fan, professional, etc., I feel like by default, and save your eyes from rolling too hard, I might lean skeptic on most things, technologies. There's been so many things, I think, that have been promised to us as the next greatest thing, and it's really just, it's the same thing, 40%, new coat of paint, yay, give your money to us instead, kind of thing. And I'm just, I'm hesitant to jump on board with this is the greatest. I would say what you're saying is, you're right. It certainly is a Microsoft give your money to us instead, but at the same time, you're paying for Windows license anyway, no matter what your solution is. Second to that, this sounds like this could be, I would say, one, the assumption is you have to have, and we're assuming that you've got on-premise resources. Let's just go right there. And we're assuming that you've got to have a solid connection between yourself and Azure in that case. But outside of that, it sounds like they've made it quite simple to get yourself a Windows desktop experience that can be controlled by your organization. The applications and security can be managed, and then, then whether you're going out to the internet, going out to Azure, or coming back home to on-premise, it seems like, possibly a very good solution. And for those who are already running Horizon out there that want to explore it, it sounds like it might be quite easy to dip your toe in the water to see what, branching out to that would be, and then maybe letting your on-premise hardware expire, or maybe you start to ship more workloads out there.
Yeah, and we've worked pretty closely with Microsoft, I think, on with a couple of different customers that had unique situations where it's been a great experience, and Microsoft's expertise. We've got a great relationship with them. Of course, we're still a partner, and so we have a lot of resources open to us there. I just want to leave you with a quick story that others may be faced with when it comes to Azure Virtual Desktop or desktops as a service in general. And one way I've seen it really help companies is, especially where you have thin clients already in place using on-prem Horizon. The first thing Azure Virtual Desktop did is they said, look, we're going to make it collaborative. We're going to make Teams, even though we all have our different opinions about Teams. We're going to make Teams a unique media experience, a great experience over Azure Virtual Desktop. And I have seen it happen several times where the integration has been absolutely terrific. So companies have been able to take an on-prem thin client from Horizon where they couldn't leverage Teams or any kind of robust technology for communication, and move to Azure Virtual Desktop and have a full-blown, great tool to communicate with their colleagues, calls in and out, and better experience on the thin client. So, I've seen that happen now a couple of different times where companies have been able to leverage that. So, yeah, it's a good product to look at, and we're always here to help, maybe make recommendations for you. So, we're available.
Awesome.
Yep.
And we're going to be having Hoppy. Maybe I don't want to spill the tea here, but we're having Ask Me Anything kind of thing coming up soon. Is this true?
Yeah, we I don't tell you things until the last minute because I think it makes you a better consultant. So we're gonna.
That's our
Keep
job.
me on my
I know.
toes. Okay.
If you knew too far ahead of time, you think about it too much. So yeah, we're gonna do an Ask Me Anything around
Like this
desktop as a
podcast.
service. We're also gonna throw Intune in there because I think there's a lot of folks out there that have questions about Intune, and really we're just gonna be talking about everything end user computing, really.
Am I the Hutch Sarsky for this one, by the way?
Heck yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That'll be good.
We'll have
That'll
a couple
be good.
beers.
We'll find
have a
Huggy
great
Bear, too.
conversation.
Maybe Coz will be our Huggy Bear.
That's right.
It's not as fuzzy anymore, though.
All right, we're going to leave that for y'all to have the visual imagination to flesh out that comment. Yes. Hoppy, thanks for joining us. Good chatting with you and looking forward to the next time you can join.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. Enjoyed it.
Awesome. Kaz, I think that wraps it. We're back.
We are.
We're back. Hopefully it'll be
here.
only a couple of... Actually, I think we have a recording in a couple of days with our next episode. So here we go. We're back.
Later this week, we're back. Yep.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to Data Center Therapy. If you've got questions, hit us at podcast@ivoxy.com. If you got questions for Hoppy, you want to talk about EVD, any of those kind of things. So thanks again for listening. Have a great day.